Did you know that with short-term rental properties, short-term Airbnb rental properties, you can earn 2 to 3 times as much income as from a long-term rental? Historically, when you're dealing with long-term renters, you have to choose between cash flow or appreciation. But when you're doing short-term rentals, you can get the best of both worlds, and that's really the Airbnb magic. But that's not always the case. If you buy the wrong property, you can lose your shirt. So in today's video, I am going to show you the steps to follow to buy your first successful Airbnb property. I'm Lauren Capwell with Sage Real Estate, and our mission is to help clients build wealth through real estate, including helping clients to find Airbnb properties. So if you haven't subscribed yet, hit the subscribe button below and click the bell to be notified every time we post a new video about building your wealth through real estate. With that being said, let's jump right in. So really the first step before you get started is to decide what kind of property you're most interested in. And really the choices are either single family or multifamily. Now, we recommend multifamily because if your goal is to build your wealth, multifamily is pretty much always going to be the best way to go. Another major benefit, you can owner occupy that property. So if you're owner occupying your property, then you can probably get a permit. If you're not owner occupying, you'll have to compete, and we're gonna get into that later. Another major benefit of going with multifamily is that if that unit ever becomes unoccupied, we know from the last 2 years that the travel industry can definitely be very up and down. So if something in the economy changes, if something in the travel industry changes, and your Airbnb business in that property just isn't bringing in the income that it used to, you can put a long-term tenant in that unit and still bring in income for that property. The final benefit is that with a multifamily property, even when your Airbnb unit isn't occupied, you will still have other long-term tenants in that property, and so that property will still be bringing in money. So the first step to invest in your multifamily property is to check the legality for the city in which you're going to be buying that property. Now, every city has different rules and ordinances that govern how and where short-term rentals can be allowed. What a lot of cities are doing to limit the number of short-term rentals that they have is that they're giving out a limited number of permits. And that way they can maintain enough housing stock for people who actually want to be residents of their city. So if you're thinking about starting a short-term Airbnb rental anywhere in the state of California and you are along the coastline, you're gonna be under the jurisdiction of your city and also the California State Coastal Commission. Now, the California State Coastal Commission is a state-run agency whose mission is to ensure fair access to the California state coastline. So for example, in Long Beach, what they're doing is there's a total of 800 permits for non-owner occupied short-term rentals. And what that means is that the owner of the property doesn't actually live on the property. So if that's you, if you're an investor and you just want to buy a property and not actually live there, you are going to have to get one of these 800 permits that's available. Currently, there are permits available. If the permits run out, you go on the wait list. And the way that the city is now dividing that up with the latest announcement from the Coastal Commission, 350 permits will be given out in the coastal zones, and the other 450 permits will be given out for the rest of the city. Now, the permits, like the limited number of permits, only apply if you are not owner occupied. If you are owner occupied, which means, say for example, you buy a fourplex, you live in one unit, 2 units are given to long-term tenants, you can get a permit for that 4th unit. And there is no limit to the number of permits that the Long Beach city is giving out for owner occupied short-term rentals. Now, this is just for the city of Long Beach. Every city is going to be different. For example, in San Diego, yesterday, the Coastal Commission approved San Diego's cap, which limits the number of permits that are given out along San Diego's coastline. All right, and the last point I want to make about permits, the reason that you have to have a permit is to even upload your listing into Airbnb, they require you to include the permit number for your city. If you don't have a permit number, you can't even upload your listing into Airbnb. Also, in the city of Long Beach, if you are running an unpermitted short-term rental and you get caught, the fine is $1,000. So don't get caught without a permit. All right, so because in the state of California, we have had an ongoing housing shortage, there's been this push and pull between long-term rentals and short-term rentals. Now, historically, the state has always been on the side of long-term rentals because those are for the residents. So whatever city that you choose to invest in for your short-term rental, you need to go and see what types of dwelling units are approved for short-term rental use. For example, in Joshua Tree, they allow you to use land. If you want to, where people can pitch a tent. However, in Long Beach, there's a short list of approved types of dwelling units that you can run your Airbnb business through. So the first type is single family dwellings, multifamilies. You can also do maids quarters, guest houses, and apartments. All of those are on the approved list. You can get those permitted or any portion thereof. Now, what's not permitted, most of this list is pretty unsurprising. They have to be habitable dwelling units. So for example, you cannot get a permit for a rumpus room, a garage, a pool house, casita, or a storage room. And most surprisingly is you cannot get a permit for a short-term rental for an ADU or a junior ADU. Now, the reason for that is because the ADU and JDU legislation was designed with the intention of expanding the housing stock for residents. And if you were to use one of those units for a short-term rental, that really goes against the spirit and the purpose of having ADUs and JDUs in Long Beach in the first place. So before you get started or before you go and buy a property, just go ahead and check and make sure that the type of dwelling unit is appropriate and permittable for the city in which you're buying it. So the next step is to talk to your lender and get all of your financing ducks in a row. Now, it's really important if you're going to buy multifamily property first, that you go with a lender who is familiar with doing loans on multifamily property. There's a number of nuances involved with multifamily that you don't necessarily have with single family. So that's really important. Find a lender who's familiar with multifamily. And also as a second benefit, if you can find a lender who's also familiar with doing loans on short-term rentals, that's really helpful because there's also a few nuances of lending there as well. So after you found your lender, the next step is to get your real estate agent. Once again, just like your lender, you want to work with an agent who is familiar with multifamily, because there's a lot of things about multifamily that are different than when you're doing single family. So you want an agent who's very familiar with the multifamily market in the city and the area where you're going to invest. Also, it's a huge benefit if you are working with an agent who is familiar with short-term rentals and can help point you to the locations and the areas where your property is going to perform the best and give you the best return on your investment. And by the way, if you're looking to purchase multifamily property here in Long Beach, please reach out to us here at Sage Real Estate. We're happy to help you. If this is resonating with you, hit that like button. What is motivating you to invest in real estate? Let us know and comment below. So the next step is to analyze the property. Now, this is one of the most critical steps because this is where you're going to find out whether or not this property is even a candidate, whether or not it's going to cash flow. So remember I mentioned back in the beginning, like not every property is a winner. This is true no matter where you go in the state of California. There are some properties and some areas that are going to do very, very well as a short-term rental. And there's other properties in other areas in Long Beach where as a short-term rental, it's not really going to make that much more than just having a long-term tenant. So this is very important to know. It's very, very important to get your numbers right at the beginning because this is what's going to set you up for success. I actually have a property we're going to walk through. This one is currently listed on the MLS. It actually just went under contract in the last 24 hours. There's a few other properties out there that are very similar to this one, so feel free to reach out. There's always more opportunities, but we're going to take a look at this one. So this one is a 4-unit property that's here in Long Beach. By the way, we are looking at this property right now through the MLS. A lot of this information is a little bit difficult to get on Redfin or Zillow because those platforms are much more set up for single family. The kind of information that you're going to want to get from multifamily is going to be the unit mix, the income per unit, things like that. That information does not always end up on Zillow or Redfin. So the way that you get access to this information is by working with an agent. As soon as you start working with an agent, they will set you up on an automatic email search. Every time a new property comes up on the MLS, you will get an email letting you know, and then you will have access to this data. If we come over to this property right here, it's 4 units. It's listed for $1.395 million here in the city of Long Beach. And if we scroll down, we can see the mix, the number of bedrooms, the number of bathrooms, and what is currently being brought in for the rents on each of these units. It seems like a lot of information. Where do you start? Well, we have designed a financial analysis calculator in Excel, and we have made it as easy to use as possible. And so I'm going to walk you through this example live right now. If we switch over to our financial analysis calculator, it's very simple. all you do is you just fill in the information that's in these white boxes. So the list price is $1.395 million. It has a total of 4 units. And that automatically populates down here your price per unit. So we're at roughly $350,000 per unit. It was 3,008 square feet. So that gives you your price per square foot, $464 for this property. And the appreciation rate. So historically in Long Beach, we've been seeing somewhere between like a 6.3 and a 6.7% rate of appreciation over the last 10 years. I'm gonna say conservatively, and this is actually far below the projections that we're supposed to do for 2022, but conservatively, 5% appreciation, because historically over any 10-year time span in real estate, there's always been at least 5% appreciation per year. So that's a very conservative number. Now let's say, I think interest rates are currently around 4.5% on your loan. So this second box right here, this is the loan metrics. Let's say you do a 30-year fixed and your down payment is 20%. So that means the down payment is going to be $279,000 and your loan amount is going to be $1.116 million. Now, this is getting into the income, expenses, and your mortgage payment. So how do you know how much income you're going to get from Airbnb on this property? All right. So this is one of the first tools that I recommend that you use. It's a website called airdna.co. That's .co, not to be confused with .com. airdna.co. So what you'll want to do is create a free account. Once you have your free account, you can just log in. Mine is set to remember me. Now, they try to get you to buy. They have like a lot of information, a lot of data. You can purchase that data, but there's also information that they're going to give you for free. And the free information is going to be enough to get you started. We're going to go over here on the left sidebar. We're going to go to Rentalizer. Now, this is where you can enter the specific property address. So we're at 476 Almond Avenue here in Long Beach. Okay. You need to pick which unit you want to Airbnb because we've got to set a few parameters in here. So if we go back over here to the MLS and we take a look at the different units that we have, one of the units is a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. On this particular property, that's actually the front house. And then the other 3 units are 1-bedroom, 1-baths. Now, if you want to maximize the amount of income that you're getting from your Airbnb property, I would recommend renting out on Airbnb the 3-bedroom, 2-bath. So we need to come back over here to AirDNA and just put in that information. So you're going to short-term rent, 3-bedroom, 2-bath. You can have, for each bedroom in Long Beach, you can have up to 2 guests plus 2 additional guests, assuming there's like a sleeper sofa. So really for this property, you could have 6 guests for the 3 bedrooms plus 2 additional. So you could have up to 8 guests. But what's interesting is that allowing for more guests doesn't always increase the total revenue that you get from the property. And we're going to take a look at that. So let's assume that you only allow for 6 guests because you only want your bedrooms to be occupied. So we update that. So the annual revenue that you would get from allowing for 6 guests is $87,800 per year in income. Now let's see what happens if you go up to 7 guests. Say, for example, you let somebody sleep on the couch. Now you're up to $88,500, so better. And if we go up to 8 guests, you just want to max out for what the city allows. That actually drops it down to $83,000 a year. And part of the reason that happens is that when Airbnb sees that you're cramming a lot of people into a house, or people just see that, it makes it like a lower quality rental. So it's not always beneficial to try to cram as many guests in there as possible. Let's just say you go for 6 guests. So this is where you get your annual revenue. And this is the average expectation of performance for a property in this area with this combination of bedrooms and bathrooms. So let's say, go back over to here. So $87,800 for the year. Now from the MLS, we saw that the other 2 units were bringing in, there was a unit that was bringing in $1,750 per month and a unit that was bringing in $1,700 per month. Now the 4th unit was also bringing in $1,700 per month, but let's just say you decide to own or occupy, so that unit's not bringing in any revenue. Down here, this is where you can put in your expense ratio. Now, for a long-term rental, your expense ratio is going to be somewhere between 30 to 35% of your gross income from the rents. With Airbnb, it tends to be a little bit higher, so I've kicked that up to 40%. You can play around with those numbers. Now, at this point, everything is calculated for you. So your total income for the year would be $129,200. You are going to have about $51,680 of that is going to be expenses. So that is everything except for your mortgage payment, everything except for principal and interest on your mortgage. That leaves you with a net operating income. So you take your income minus your expenses. That leaves you with your net operating income, $77,520. And a mortgage payment, your mortgage payment is going to be $67,855 for the year. So if you take all those numbers, look down here. So that gives you a positive cash flow of close to $10,000, $9,665 for the year. Now, what's really interesting is that this property, without doing Airbnb, this property would actually be cash flow negative. So you would be coming out of pocket every single month if you had a long-term renter in there. As soon as you switch to Airbnb, now suddenly you are cash flowing, which is awesome. Two of the most important things that people forget about returns on their investment, people get kind of caught up on the cash flow and they're like, oh, like that's not very much cash flow. Here's what most people miss. And this is kind of like the portion of the iceberg that's under the water when it comes to building wealth through real estate. It's your principal pay down, because your principal on your loan is being paid down by your long-term and short-term renters. And it's the appreciation of the property for that year. So if your property only appreciates 5% for the year, but remember, this is like a $1.4 million property. That is still like close to $70,000 in appreciation that you get, which means if you were to turn around and sell the property after the first year, your total return would be $97,418 minus closing costs, minus taxes, blah, blah, blah. But this is where it gets really exciting. So this is how kind of Airbnb and short-term rentals are really, this is why it's the secret to both getting cash flow on properties and appreciation. Historically, when you're dealing with long-term renters, you have to choose between cash flow or appreciation. But when you're doing short-term rentals, you can get the best of both worlds, and that's really the Airbnb magic. So if you're curious about using this calculator to make your calculations as easy as possible, click the link in the description below where you can download it. So the next step is to actually buy the property. Now, we've done a full video on how to buy your first multifamily investment property. You can click the link up here, or it's also down in the description below. So the steps are basically writing your offer, having your offer accepted, going through the escrow process, and closing. And this is where it's very important to work with an agent who is familiar with multifamily properties. So there you have it. Those are all the steps you need to know to buy your first successful short-term Airbnb rental property. If you still have any questions, just go ahead and comment down below. Our team is super happy to help. If you're looking to buy a multifamily property here in Long Beach or any of the surrounding cities, feel free to reach out to us. We are happy to help you. And that's it. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.